Hello there YouTube. So this video is all about how to make the low profile XLR and TA3 or TA5 connectors. This same process can be applied to other kinds of connectors as well, and the basic principles are the same, and I'm going to run you through them now. So these are the things in question that we're talking about here. These are some TA3s, and they have a exit on the right side that's been drilled there. So this is kind of what the fuss is all about. The reason why you might want this is in situations where they need to be low profile. So in the instance of a sound recordist's sound bag, it's very important to have not a lot of cable poking out of the sides when they actually go into a bag. And so as you can see, these XLRs have had the wire exit on the side. The back are then filled in with epoxy resin. And what it creates is a very low profile setup. So it's great. Obviously the downsides to it are that they don't have the same level of strain protection that's sort of patented by Neutrik, who make all these connectors. But with the glue in there, I feel like they do have enough strain relief. And in situations where they're being used like this, they're not being tugged and tugged. They're not on a microphone cable, rock band. So they're not really being abused in the same way. So they're very handy for this, and obviously it's worth pointing out that Neutrik don't endorse doing this. It's a DIY thing, but it works very well, and I use my bag in the field, and it works great. I've also done the same thing for some friends who run recording studios and that kind of stuff, and they've got some very tight situations with some of their gear, and then this low profile stuff works really well. Okie dokie, so now you know what they are, and there's a whole bunch of tools here, and I'm going to run you through quickly what the tools are and why they're necessary, and yeah, where you can kind of pick them up and that kind of stuff. So the first one is a drill. I've got a fairly cheap electric drill here. I actually just picked it up second hand. You can have proper sort of bench press drills, the ones that you pull a lever and it comes down with a drill bit. I'm sure they would probably do a slightly more accurate job, but this video is in the interest of people who want to do it themselves and have a sort of DIY ethic to it. So as with a lot of these tools, there are probably ways of doing it that are more professional. But yeah, this is for do it yourself, and some people do make these very beautifully, these connections, and they sell them, and all power to them. But this is a way of doing it by yourself. So yeah, all of these tools are kind of in that ethic. So yeah, the first is electric drill. Pick up one of these. You can get them anywhere. You've probably already got one. The other thing is some drill bits that will suit going into metal. The metal is not particularly hard, but I've just got a basic set. It actually came with a drill, so that's cool, and they seem to work for me. The next thing is a soldering iron. You can have a cheap kind of household thing that's just like an iron with a plug on the end, sort of 30-watt job. They just don't really work as well, and with this kind of stuff you actually need to have a bit of a better soldering iron. I picked this one up in London, UK, where I am here. It was on an offer and it was 40 quid. It's a Chinese made iron. It's not the best. It's not an American Weller, but I know now that the American Wellers are being made in China anyway, so yeah, recommended by a good friend of mine that actually one like this is going to be fine. When you buy it, you want to pick up some spare tips for the end of these guys. And the tip I've got here, as you can see, is a very sort of fine tip. This is going to be really important because you've got to get inside the connection. So the fact that it's quite sharp, if it's got a great big spade end on it, then you're never going to get it inside these teeny connections. So the next thing, and this is kind of personal preference with some of this stuff, but I've got some bits and bobs here. I've got a solder sucker, it's called. You click it down and it'll pull up solder. So if you make a mistake, you can just pull away the excess solder. It's quite handy. I've got a good set of wire clippers. These aren't the best again, but they work for me, and yeah, they do the job. A lot of this stuff is just personal preference. You just find something that works and you stick with it. I've got a Stanley knife here, pretty useful for chopping bigger cables and that kind of stuff. These are just some needle nose pliers. Again, these are all like just a couple of quid from a hardware shop. A screwdriver that's flathead. This is actually a bit knackered, this screwdriver. It's perfect for moving stuff around. I've got some wire strippers here. Again, these are kind of terrible, but I stick with them because they work. These are sort of larger wire clippers. These are pretty handy for actually just chopping off the connections. As you can see, these are all just sort of household brands. There's nothing professional about them. Over here we've got a glue gun. This is an important thing. You can pick up one of these from a sort of hobby shop, or from somewhere like Maplin or something like that in the UK. I'm sure that US shops you can pick them up as well. This is just a really basic kind of thing you used to have at school, and what this is for is filling the cavity of the connection before you fill the end with epoxy. This is going to be a really important tool, and yeah, these are about, you know, between £5 and £10, so not break the bank money. Other bits and bobs we've obviously got our epoxy resin. This is just I've tried a few different types out. This is not my favorite one, but I'm using it up. So yeah, these ones that come and they mix when you squeeze them out are pretty handy, and they store quite easily as well. Other bits and bobs, we've got some of these are cable ties, small ones. For the XLR connections, I like to put a cable tie on the cable. We'll come to that though, but yeah, some small cable ties are pretty handy. We've got some silver solder. This is probably a little too big for the job. You can get them in different sizes. You probably want a slightly thinner solder than this, but this stuff works, it's okay. And then we've got some different tweezers here. We've got some fine ones. These are pretty useful for pulling the cables through, and then some thicker ones. And these are really handy for bending wire and stuff like that. We'll come to that in a bit, just so that you got them. This is a really handy thing, a sort of solder mate. You can move the bits up and down, and these are really handy because this is basically the middle of where you clip your connections, that kind of stuff. This is a real pain in the neck for moving around, so I use one of these quick grips, which is pretty handy. And yeah, with one of these, just trying to do it one-handed here, you can clip the thing down onto your bench, and it really then stays very, very secure. So that's pretty handy. And lastly, you can see that I'm actually doing this in my living room, and it's pretty handy to have a board. Saves your better half getting annoyed about table solder marks all over the table. So yeah, one of these boards is pretty handy. You can just get a large kitchen board or just some old bit of wood. The last thing is just a whole bunch of connections and stuff. Now again, this is just what I've got left over from various other projects and making cables and stuff. You may already have a load of these or not. But yeah, have them all out by the side. I've got a whole different range of heat shrink here as well. So yeah, have your kit out, get it ready, and set yourself up. Stick some music on as well. Okie dokie, so step one in this process is drilling the actual hole for the wire to exit through. So we've got our connector here. I'm actually making an ever so slightly different kind of connection here. It's one for a wireless boom setup. So it's got a teeny little circuit board in there as well. But the principles are all the same. I didn't want to waste anything, so I thought we'd show you that. I'm going to do another little video on the TA3 that will be in addition to this. And I can show you how to do those tiny connections. So anyway, the first thing to do, we're going to pin down our thing here. I've got this little gully that runs around this board, which works as quite a good thing to actually grip the connector. I use one of these quick clamps and I just clamp it down so it's held on. It doesn't need to be completely rock solid, but that's good enough. If you've got a vise or something like that, that's great. I actually just literally don't have one, so yeah, that's what I'm using. So here we go, here's our drill with the, I've got a small drill bit on here. Now this one in size is, let me tell you, a 2mm metal drill bit. I do this first because I basically do a pilot hole and then I do the larger hole, and this one here is a 4mm. I'm using the Van Dam patch cable as my cable, so whatever works. But you know, if you look at the back of the drill bit, you can get a pretty good idea for what the size for the cables need to be. Okay, so then yeah, it's just simply a case of drilling the pilot hole. So I use these grooves as a bit of a marker, and I'm going to go in just above this groove here. So you're nice and kind of confidently you want to get your hole in there. So we'll drill away. And just start slow. And there you go, it's just bitting in now, so you can speed it up a little bit. There we go, we're through. So that's our pilot hole done. Just take this drill bit off and we'll go for the larger drill bit. And then we're just going to make the hole bigger. So again, you don't want to rush this too much. Just take your time with it. Sometimes, it doesn't really want to go. This is when, you know, it kind of helps to have it really firmly clamped down. So I think it's kind of useful that actually this happened in this video. So make sure it's really well clamped, and we'll just do the same thing again. Don't try and rush it. You can go backwards a little bit just to kind of get rid of any of those grooves, and then just start gently and just let the weight of the drill go in. You don't want to rush this part. There we go, we're through. So it's not the neatest. If you've got a little file, which you can get little hand files, you can neaten the hole up a bit. I actually find if you just get something like an old screwdriver, this thing here that I use, you can just kind of neaten this bit up and just get rid of any of those excess bits of metal. That's pretty neat. Yeah, and you can smarten this up. Now I've seen that some guys in the US and in UK who make these professionally, they use the little grommets to put in here as well. That just gives it a bit of extra protection. You know, you can do that. I find that again in the situations where these are being used, they're not really being strained all that much, and so I don't really feel the need for it. It just makes the actual job a bit harder, and it's another thing to have to do. So I find, you know, with the glue around it, it's pretty well protected, and the cables are fine. So yeah, there's the first bit, the drilling done. Okie dokie, so first things first, now we've got the hole in our connector. We need to now prepare our wire. So here's the cable I'm going to be using. I'm going to use my wire strippers, and we're just going to take back just enough that you actually need here. As I said earlier, these wire strippers aren't the greatest, but they do the job, so I stick with them. So here in this cable we've got a bit of cloth. Now if you do have that, you can just burn the cloth off with a lighter. It just gets rid of that. So you want to separate the ground here from our two internal connections. So we'll just pull this apart, and I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so this next stage is just about tinning the wire. So I've got the wire here set up on my bench. I've just got the connections. I've stripped them back with my wire strippers. So yeah, just going to add a little solder onto the end of them, get the soldering iron nice and hot, and yeah, I'm just going to touch the solder on there too. And what that does is just puts a little solder on the end of the cable, and it does a process called tinning it. This really is just like, you don't want to have to be doing this process when you're actually making the connection. So you just heat it up, any sort of impurities on the stuff, any plastic or resin or whatever made from making the cable comes off and burns off, and yeah, you just get a bit of solder actually into the wire, and that really formulates the bond. So you can see it takes it then. It'll take a bit of solder. You don't want to have a great big blob like that on there. So yeah, you can just work away and keep cleaning the tip. And yeah, there we go. So that looks pretty good. It's a bit of a chunky bit there, but it's because it's this braided cable. So there is our cable ready to go. Yeah, so now we're gonna actually make the connection. I'm just gonna neaten that up a little bit more because it's still a bit chunky. So there we go. We just want this braided bit not too thick. Okay, so now we're on to the kind of hard part, and this is really where the you know, everything we've done so far is all just pretty basic soldering, like making XLR cables. This is the part where the low profile stuff kind of comes in. So we actually want to put our connection. This is the same for TA3s or XLRs, or even this one that's got these little other connection points at the back. We put the connection inside here, and we push it through so that it's all the way. We're then going to feed the cable through the hole that we've drilled. Okay, we'll push it through like that, and then we're going to set it up on the bench and solder it. At this stage, should you wish to, you can put some heat shrink around the cable, and it just adds a little other layer of protection there. You can actually come to heat shrink that later when you pull the cable through. And should you want to put a grommet in there, you can do that at this stage too. Now is the moment to be setting this stuff up, because you've got to put it on the cable. You don't have to put it in straight away, but it's at this point when you start soldering, you kind of can't go back in time then. So you've got to set all that stuff up. I am going to put a bit of heat shrink on this because it's going to be used on a boom. I don't think I need the grommet, but I'm going to put a bit of heat shrink on there. Okay, so now we've got the cable poked through. I've got a bit of heat shrink on the cable. We've poked it through the hole, and I've set it up on the bench here. I've actually used the back of a male XLR cable here just so I can grip it. Again, you know, you can buy proper vices and all that kind of stuff, but you know, this video really is just about having the basic equipment and being able to do it yourself. So we've got our soldering iron turned up. We've got it nice and clean. we're going to just put a teeny bit of solder on the end of the iron and clean it off just to make sure it's ready to go. So we've got our cable tin back here. Everything's tinned inside the connection, so I'm just going to try and just very gently here, just get that solder to connect with the part that we have in there. At this stage, it's quite handy to use the tweezers. If you manipulate the cable a little bit, you can sometimes make life a little easier. I'm going to get a little blob of solder on the end of the iron here. Manipulating the cable, I'm just going to try and get that connection to bite. Obviously, you've got a reasonable amount of real estate in here. That's just taking now. So yeah, you just have to kind of have a little fiddle with it. Put a bit more solder on the end here. I'm just going to get a nice solid connection between these two. And there we go, the solder is just melting now. You don't want to use too much, but you do want to have a good connection, especially on that ground. Okay, so there you go, it's taking a nice bit. We just want it nice and neat in there as well, so we're just going to even that off. And there we go. That first one's taken, so the ground is connected now. So now we've got our other two cables. We can use the tweezers to kind of manipulate these around. Now the blue is going to go down the middle and the red over here. So just for the moment, because we're not going to be concerning ourselves with the red on this next joint, I'm just going to get the red out of the way a bit, and we're going to move it into place. Now you see that the actual pin here it's got to connect to is in a sort of vertical plane. This is currently in a horizontal plane. Now to make life a bit easier for yourself, I like to just bend the cable so that it's kind of setting itself up ready to go in there. And you see I can just stretch it a little bit like that, and in it will go. It's a two-handed job, so you've got to get kind of good at using the tweezers with your left hand here. Get the soldering on. We're going to get it with a bit of solder on the end again. And you kind of don't get many attempts at this because if it starts getting really hot, the cable will melt and the jacket of the cable will melt, and it just kind of turns into a bit of a mess. So the best thing to do is kind of get it really well set up. I'm not quite set up well enough there. Get it really well set up. Get everything kind of lined up so that really will just be a case of touching the two together, and then they should just take. So there we go, we're pretty well set up now. Okie dokie. So again, it's a bit of a fiddle. This is where it'd be quite good to use the other hand. There we go, it's just taking it. Okay, so with the soldering side of things done now, at this stage I'm going to point out that because this is a slightly different type of cable, I'm not actually going to cable tie this, but if it was an XLR, just a regular female or male, you'd have a bit more space in there because the circuit board wouldn't be there. At that stage then, what I would do is I'd get a cable tie, bend the end a little bit, just so it's got a bit of a curvature on it. And with a bit of a fiddle, you get it underneath the cable here. In fact, we could actually put one on here, there's no reason why not. You put it underneath the cable here, and you get it round, and then you zip tie it down. And what that does is it means that if you were to pull on this cable, the zip tie is holding it there, preventing it from going anywhere. And it kind of acts as a strain relief. What it means is that the glue doesn't have to do all the work, really, because we don't want too much being relied on with the glue. So with this cable tie in place, it will help with that. It's a bit of a fiddle to get the little thing round. We can use our little tweezers here to pull it through. There we go. Okay, so then we can just zip tie this down. And I just then, you know, when you look at the cable and you see it out in the field, you can feel nice and confident that someone pulls on it. You've done this cable tie up and it's not going to be putting any tension on their solder joints. So there we go, that's zip tied down nicely. We'll chop this off really close. And then we kind of need to just shove it into the cavity that we've got there, just so that we've got plenty of room to cover up with the glue. So we'll just see if you can see that nice and close up. We'll cover that up and shove it down. There we go. We're also going to make sure the connection's pushed fully forward here. Sometimes you can do it, fill it with glue and realise it's not quite there and it will never make a proper connection. So there we go, there's our bit. We've now got our glue gun nice and hot. And the glue is not at a temperature where you're going to burn yourself if you touch it. You know, it's not crazy hot, so it's kind of pliable, and that's sort of what you want here. This cavity, if you put the epoxy resin in, because the epoxy is much more sort of runny than this glue gun is, it will just fill down and fill all the connections. The problem you have there then is that this push-pull the connection here to actually undo the XLR, that all gets filled with resin, and it's a disaster. It's kind of game over with it. And having come this far, it's a shame to mess it up. So what I do is I'll quite gently fill this cavity with the glue gun's glue. And what I'm really looking to do, this glue here isn't to actually be structural to the connection. It's just to kind of seal it off. It's a bit messy, but you can pull this stuff out. So I'm just looking to fill those holes, and as you can see, I'm just filling in there like that. And don't worry too much about it being a mess, because you can sort that out in a minute. I then use a cocktail stick or that screwdriver I've got, and I then just push the glue just to make it seal all around here. Make sure all these little bits are filled in, and you can manipulate the glue around. You can touch it, it's not so hot, you're going to burn yourself, like I say. So I'm just going to fill it in, and there we go. The cavity's pretty well filled in now. It looks a bit messy, but don't worry about this, because we're going to fill that up with epoxy, and it will cover all that up. Okie dokie, so there we go. We've got all that pulled up, and we can pull these stringy bits away, and we're there. We're kind of ready now. So with glue gun done, we've got the cable tie on, the connection's all made, it's terminated, we've got it nice and neat and tidy in there. The resin's not going to run down anywhere that's going to fill up the plug and mess up our connection. We've got it all sealed off in there, so that's all good. And you can just check, just poke around with the cocktail stick or something like that, just to check we've not got any big holes there. And you can use some of these other bits if you have got a little hole. I've got a teeny one down there. I don't think it would matter, but you can use some of these bits and just poke them into the hole, and that really is just about sealing it up. Now again, I don't know how sort of professionals and people that make these professionally do theirs. This seems to work for me, and I've got a whole bunch of them that I use, and I've been using them for months and months, some for a year or so, and yeah, they seem to be working just fine. I've got no problems with them, so this way of doing it definitely works. So now we're going to want to make sure that our plug is on the horizontal, because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fill it with our epoxy resin. So we've got our resin here. I've got a little bit of foil, household foil that I've just folded up, and this is what I'm going to mix it on. It's just so that you don't have to have. You can just chuck all this in the bin when you're done with it, basically. One thing is, be aware that the chemical reaction that happens between the fixing and the resin, the two chemicals in here, that actually gets hot when the two mix. So don't be alarmed that the thing's getting warm. It's not, again, not so hot you're going to burn yourself, but it does get warm, and suddenly it can kind of surprise you if you don't know about it. So we're going to squeeze out an amount onto here for us. Oh, we've got to get some coming out the other one. So there we go. And we'll squeeze out about enough to fill that cavity. This is going to set really quite quickly, so now we need to work fast. So we're going to put the lid back on there. I'm going to use one of my trusty cocktail sticks, mix the two components together here. And once they're pretty well mixed like that, it's at this stage that I know that some people I've seen put dye. You can get epoxy dye, and I can just be quite kind of rough with this. So I'm just going to tip it into that cavity like that. And bear in mind, you can always make more of this stuff. So in a way, it's better just to kind of drip it in and see how you get on. You can always put more on top, and it'll make a very good bond. So there we go, that's filling up nicely. So as I say, yeah, if you wanted to put some dye in there, you can have it all swanky and colourful. I've seen some people do. So there we go, that's looking pretty nice. At this stage, you can just, some of the bubbles that come up, they come up in this really viscous resin. So you can just, if you manipulate with the cocktail stick a little bit like that, you can just pop the bubbles. Let's get another one now. If you just want it to look neat. I mean, I'm not too fussed about all this stuff, because if it works, it works. But yeah, you can just pop some of these bigger bubbles just so it looks nice. And there we go. So now that's going to set very shortly. The reason why I actually don't put coloured dye into the resin is because I use just a pen to actually mark them. Because this is such a hard, shiny surface, you can use a whiteboard marker and then just rub it out, by using a dry white marker. and writing on them, it is a pretty handy sort of thing to be able to do, to number them and stuff. So yeah, I'm not so into the colors. And as I said, if you want to go for that stuff, I would, you can buy them professionally. I just think for the price of the equipment here, I've got, it's about £150. You can kind of, once you've made a couple, you've made your money back. So here we go, I'm just popping some of the bubbles there that have come up. It's starting to set now, so I kind of need to leave it alone. And so now, yeah, we just allow the thing to set. And then it should set very hard, and that would be our connection done. So yeah, here's the finished product. The epoxy is set now. So as you can see there, it's kind of just quite a shiny finish on it, which is pretty handy because, as I say, I draw in permanent marker on them and just put numbers, and then you can, if you want to get rid of them, you use the old trick of putting whiteboard marker on it and rubbing it out. But yeah, as you can see, you've got the exit there from the cable, and you've got that bit of heat shrink on it, which is nice. This button still works, which is good. It means the epoxy hasn't all dribbled down into it, and none of it's coming out of there, which is all possible. So that was that very important step of getting that glue gun in there first. So yeah, all done. Best of luck with making them. If you've got any questions, do ask, and yeah, do share the video to anyone else who might find it helpful. I'm going to do another one on TA3s very soon.